Hello and welcome to the Susie Makes Craft channel, a craft channel that will take you through the mainly basic level of a variety of crafts. We have also, at the moment, covered crochet, knitting, card craft, stitching, fabric craft, all sorts. And today we're back with the crochet, and I'm going to show you how to join as you go granny squares. Now, the join when you're doing a single row is just one side, but when you start adding more rows you need to go along two sides. I'm going to show you both methods so you can complete whatever it is you want to complete with your granny squares. So I've got a white granny square here which is going to be attached just on this side here of the yellow. So first of all I need to turn my work onto the wrong side. A lot of people say crochet doesn't have a wrong side, but I disagree slightly. I think there is a slight difference, although both do look attractive. So I've turned my work over and I have crocheted a granny square two rows, and on the third row, all of my granny squares are 3 rows in total. On the third row I have done two sides. Now, so I've gone along this side, done the corner, which is a treble, two chains and a treble cluster. Done a treble cluster on the side there, and instead of a treble, 2 chains and a treble on this corner, I so far have a treble cluster only in place. Now, instead of doing a 2 chains for the corner here, I've done 1 chain. And the reason for this is because in between all of your treble clusters, generally you have a chain 1 on a granny square. Well, when you join it on that particular side, you don't do chain 1s because your joining replaces the chain 1s. So on this corner I have an ordinary side, so I've done chain 1. And for the second chain, now just briefly, I tend to crochet the old-fashioned English way, which I work the yarn and the hook in the same hand, instead of the continental way, where you may work the yarn with your left hand if you are right-handed, and work your hook with the right hand. I could never get on with that, I suppose, because I'm first and foremost I am a knitter, was for 50 years before I took up crochet. So your yarn, if you know the continental way of crocheting, will already be held on this left hand side, whereas because I crochet with mine on the right hand side, in order to do the joining I have to move mine over because it has to be done with the yarn on the left hand side. So we have the first treble cluster chain 1 for the second corner. For the second chain we now do a join onto our main body of work. And we do that by placing the hook. Normally when you're maybe joining with a double crochet your granny squares, you'd probably just go through like this. You go through the opposite way when you're joining as you go granny squares. So the hook goes through the gap in the corner of your main body of work towards you, and your yarn goes around the back of the hook to the front. Hold on with a bit of tension while you pull through. Now I'm just putting my yarn back to how I normally work with it. It is slightly fiddlier for those of us who crochet the traditional English way, but still works out exactly the same, so you just do it the way you feel comfortable. And we finish that off just by slit stitching it through. Now we can do the second treble cluster in that corner. So into the same corner we do 3 trebles. 1, 2. All my terms are UK terms, by the way. The crochet terminology does differ between the UK and the USA. So let me show you. Let's take my hook out, might be a bit easier. There. So you see I have finished that. Let's just jiggle that so that you can see the hole more clearly. I have finished that corner now. You can see the gap and the second treble cluster, and I have it joined. You might be able to see it better that way, to my main body of work. So back to show you the rest of this line. Right, so remember, no chain one, so I've just done that second treble cluster for that corner. So I'm just moving my yarn over to the left in order to do the next join. So you've done the corner, so you find the next gap in your granny square that you're joining onto. Your hook comes from the back towards you, the hook going towards you, holding on to the yarn in between the one you're joining and your main body. You bring your yarn around the back of the hook, hook it, slight tension as you pull it through, and then slip stitch over to just one working loop. Now you do the next treble cluster in your granny square that you are working on. So here I go 1, 2, 3, and we join into the next gap. So I move my yarn around, and here's your next gap in your main body of work in the granny square that you're joining to. So your hook comes through the back towards you, your yarn goes around the back of the hook, hook it and hold it with a bit of tension to pull it through. You've now got your 2 stitches on the hook. Take the back one over the front one, slip stitching it off. You see how that is joining now? Now we're back to the next treble cluster, which is actually going to be the first treble cluster of the third corner. So we go 1, 2, 3. Now I chain 1 as we're on a corner, and we now do our final join of this side. So we're on the corner of the granny square we're joining onto, and we're about to make the rest of the corner of the granny square we're making. So holding the yarn between the 2 granny squares that you're working with, the hook comes from the back through to from the front through to the back towards you. Your yarn goes around the back of the hook to the front, holding on to it with a bit of tension while you pull it through. So you've got your 2 stitches on the hook. You take the back stitch over the front stitch to complete the join. Now we do the second treble cluster to complete this corner. So into that same gap we go 1, 2, 3, and now we're not joining anymore, we're finishing the third row of this granny square. Now we've completed the join on that side. Shall I just show you what it looks like? There, all nice and neat. So now we're back to crocheting in the normal way. We chain 1 and we put a treble cluster into the next gap. And there's the third one. Chain 1. And I make my granny squares so that I start with the treble cluster in the first corner, but I don't complete it until I get round and back up to the beginning. So I need to add another treble cluster into that, my first corner. 1. If you would like to know a little bit more, like how to make a granny square before you tackle this sort of thing, for instance, I always finish with a chain 1 and then a slip stitch into the third chain 3 where I start. There. Scissors. And if you would like to know more about how to make a granny square, there are other videos on my channel showing you how to do all of this. And there. Now it will need pulling about a bit just to make it go into shape, just a little bit, and it does settle down to more or less an even line. So there, now I have 5 granny squares in there. Right, let's dispense with the white, and my next, just unravel some yarn. Just take my tail off that one. Now I'm going to show you how to do join as you go, where you need to join 2 sides. Now then, let's just adjust my camera again. Now I've started I'm just going to take a slurp of tea. Excuse me, my throat's a bit sore. Oh, that's better. Now, I'm just doing a step pattern really. As you can see, the white was the beginning there, so it becomes the second there. In the next row it will become the 3rd square. So green was the next one, so green is the next step on this row. Now, my green granny square, I have completed two whole rounds and one side of the 3rd round up to, so I've done a treble cluster here. Now I don't complete my first corner until I get all the way back round the other side. That's why there's only 1 treble cluster there. Then I've chained 1 treble cluster on the side there, chained 1, and the first treble cluster in the 2nd corner here. Now, as before, instead of a chain 2, I've chained 1, because all your chain 1s will now become your joins. So you won't need to do them until you get back round to this side where you finish off. So, as before, I need to put my yarn over to the left hand side. Now, might be better if I just turn the whole thing over, so it might. As before, I'm joining the green onto the pink, so I need to find the centre hole in that pink, which has already got a yellow joined into it from the first row. That's fine. You go into that same centre hole in the pink corner there. The yarn goes from the front of the work through to the back, which is now facing you. And you take your yarn around the back of the hook, hook it over the front, holding with a bit of tension, pull it through. So you've got your 2 stitches sitting on the hook, and you just slip stitch the back stitch over the front stitch, and you've made that first join. So I just need to put my working yarn back, which is a bit fiddly when you do the old-fashioned English way of crocheting. I think this will actually be easier method for those of you who crochet in the continental way. However, it is very enjoyable, and I must admit I have made an entire blanket using this method of joining. Right, so now I'm going to do the 2nd treble cluster to complete this corner. So in the same gap, I just do 3 trebles. 1, 2, 3. Now remember, no chain 1 because we're joining. So I need to pull my yarn across to the left, find the next gap on the pink, bring the crochet hook from the front of the work through to the back. Now it's sitting with the hook facing me, and I take my yarn around the back of the hook to the front, hold with a bit of tension, pull through with your 2 stitches on the hook, take the back stitch over the front stitch, and there, just quickly show you, we have joined those first two. So we continue now with another treble cluster into the front granny square. One, two, three. You may think this looks exactly the same as you did first time, and you're right, of course. The difference will be when we get to the corner. So pull my yarn over to the left, find the next gap on the pink, put your crochet hook from the front to the back so the hook is facing you, and with your yarn going around the back of the hook to the front, holding on to it while you pull through. Take the first stitch over the front stitch there to complete. Now we do the first treble cluster into this next corner. One, two, three. Now you may have remembered when I joined this white one, when I got to this end, I did a chain one because there's normally 2 chains on every corner, and then joined the final piece of that side. I'm not going to do any chains at all on this because you're going to join twice in this corner. So first of all, your hook goes in between the 2 pink treble clusters of that corner towards you with the hook facing you. Your yarn comes around the back of the hook over the front, hold on to it while you pull it through. Now take the first stitch over the front stitch. Now you're going to also do exactly the same in the corner of the white granny square of the second row. So you've joined onto the pink. Now you're going to join onto this side onto the white of the second row. So onto the pink of the first row. Now we're going to do this one. Join onto the white of the second row. So you find the corner space between the 2 treble clusters on that white corner there. Put your hook in exactly the same way from the front to the back of the work with the hook facing you. The yarn goes around the back of the hook to the front. Hold on to it, pull it through, 2 stitches on your hook, take the back stitch over the front stitch. Now you can complete the second treble cluster of that corner. 1, 2, 3. And you continue joining along the white in the usual way. So you find the next gap, you put your hook through, you wrap your yarn around, pull through, back stitch over the front stitch, and we're away. Next treble cluster. 1, 2, and there's something immensely satisfying not having a pile of granny squares to sew together at the end of this. You've just got a lovely granny square blanket. Now obviously you can choose to change the colours of your granny squares. I've chosen to do mine single colours just for ease of showing you how to do this on video. Now I'm doing the first treble cluster of this corner on the green. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm only joining into one hole here, and then we're finishing a normal row along there. So I will do a chain 1 first. Now I will join into this last corner of the white. So hook through the corner gap, yarn around, pull through, back stitch over front stitch, and complete the second treble cluster of this corner on the green. 1, 2, 3. Now we're just finishing, and as though we're doing and finishing the final side of a granny square. Now we've done all our joining. You can see how that's all joined now. And so we chain 1, and we do a treble cluster into the side panel there, as we would in a normal way. So we're just doing the last side of another granny square. That's 3, chain 1, and the final treble cluster is in the corner where I started. To complete that corner, I managed to wrap my yarn around the drawer handle, as you do. 1, 2, 3, chain 1, and I finish with a slip stitch into the third chain of my beginning chain 3. I find if I finish with an actual double crochet on the final side, it doesn't quite look right. So I finish with a slip stitch, which gives me that nice gap, just the right size that I need in the corner there. And there you have. Let's move that out the way. Join as you go granny squares. And when you're just doing one side, and when you're doing 2, and you just continue for the rest of whatever your project is that you're making. For instance, this could be a cushion cover or a blanket. I haven't even made up my mind yet. But if it were a blanket, you would just do your first line, as I did here, for as long as you want it, or as wide as you want it on a bed, for instance. And then you would just join in exactly the way I've showed you for all subsequent lines, joining along 2 sides. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, it would be lovely if you'd subscribe so you didn't miss out on any future ones. Thank you for stopping by. I hope it has been informative, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye for now.